Focus is based on the subject's distance from the camera. On bigger projects, a first assistant camera person, commonly called the first AC, is responsible for keeping the shot in focus. They do this by measuring the distance from the camera to the subject. They'll also need to know what the depth of field is, so they know how precise their focus needs to be. Depth of field is the term used to describe the area of the frame that is in focus. You can have a shallow depth of field, or you can have a deep depth of field. Shallow depth of field is when there is very little of the frame in focus. This is typically used on close-up shots and gives it that cinematic feel. Deep depth of field has most or all of the frame in focus. This is used for wide establishing shots, or if you're in a run and gun situation when pulling focus is unreasonable. How much depth of field you have is determined by a few factors: the subject's distance to the camera, focal length, the camera sensor size, and f-stop. This can also be known as aperture and refers to how wide open your lens is. There are some simple rules for figuring out how to get the desired depth of field. If you want a shallow depth of field, use a long focal length with a wide open f-stop. If you want a deep depth of field, do the opposite. The shorter the focal length and the more closed down the f-stop, the deeper the depth of field will be. As you can see, we have a very shallow depth of field. This is done with the camera lens at its longest focal length and the maximum aperture. Compare this with the same shot using the widest focal length on the lens and the aperture stopped down. You can see that much more of the frame is in focus. Getting to know your camera and how these settings work will help you compose better looking shots. You can get a depth of field calculator for free or very cheap on your smartphone. It'll allow you to put in the sensor size, aperture, focal length, and subject distance, and will give you a very accurate reading on how much is in focus. Practicing these techniques will help you become a much better camera operator.